Children are dismissed for Children's Church. I'm going to guess that some of y'all looked at your bulletins this morning and thought, what does David and Goliath have to do with Hebrews? Well, nothing really. We're just setting aside the Hebrews study for today. I'll get to that, but this story of David and Goliath, it's so famous that it's pervasive even in our wider culture, right? Like everybody knows this story. Even if you don't go to church, even if you didn't grow up in a church, you know the basics of this story. Because it's often used to describe an almost impossible task, right? It's like sportscasters, they'll use it when they're talking about like an uneven matchup, right? This is a David and Goliath matchup. Some tiny school is going up against some real big school, right? A large successful program. Every major upset is a David and Goliath situation. That's what we do with it. And so this story then is taught to every child growing up in every church, and it's always presented this way. Can you believe that a small boy could defeat a giant? Can you even believe that? I mean, when I was growing up, the flannel graph, you got Goliath and he's this big, and you got David and he's this big, and you're like, well, how is this ever going to work? No way that works. And so this week, I started out, and I'm telling you, I have half a sermon written from the book of Hebrews, and then I heard this song, and I heard I was listening to a sermon from some other pastor, and it was very similar to other sermons I've heard preached on David and Goliath, and I was like, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it per se, but I think there's something more to this story. I kept wondering, like, are we missing out on something when we think of this battle between David and Goliath as this impossible, scary position to be in, and so there's this frightening giant. It's facing us down as we're barely scraping by. So I wanted to take a look at this story to see, is there something more to this story? Is it, when we face these giants in our culture or in our lives, are we really just scraping by? Is it really like, well, if I overcome this enemy, it's just by the skin of my teeth? Or is there something more to it? So this morning we're going to take a look at this well-known story. And I think we're going to see that people who trust in the Lord have nothing to fear from the giants around us. That actually our victory is much more of a foregone conclusion than we ever thought. So if you'll join me, we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And we're going to start in the first verse. It's a long passage, but I want to read it all up front so we get the whole picture all up front. So we're going to go through verse 54. So buckle up. Now the Philistines, they gathered their forces for war and assembled at Succo in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes. Listen, I'm not going to even pronounce these things, between these two cities. And Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. And a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted at the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to fight me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tending his father's sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. 40 days, twice a day. So 80 times he's doing this. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and take these 10 loaves of bread to your brothers, for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of the unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines." Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and asked his brothers, "How you doing?" As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from the lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? And he comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He'll also give him his daughter in marriage, and he'll exempt his family from taxes in Israel." And David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And they replied to him what they had been saying, and they told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." So when Eliab, David's older brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him, and he asked, "Why have you come down here? And whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You come down only to watch the battle." "What have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" Then he turned away to someone else, and he brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. So David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put on a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. He fastened a sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I can't go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream. He put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. And he despised him. And he said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. Now David said to the Philistine, you come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, who you defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give you the carcasses of the Philistine armies to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world is going to know there's a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know that it is not by the sword or the spear that God saves, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give all of you into our hands. And as the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly to the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword. He drew it from the sheath, and after he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. And when the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. And then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Sharim road to Gath and Ekron. And when the Israelites returned from chasing down the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem, and he put the Philistine's weapon in his own tent. And this morning, I want you to know that fear begins with a lack of faith. Fear begins when we lose faith in who God is and what he can do. Sometimes in life, and you all know this, we all know this, sometimes in life we face significant problems, and our enemies can be truly dangerous. What we don't want to do with this story is act like Goliath was not a true danger. He really was. The Philistine army was truly dangerous. There's nothing in this story that says we should diminish the role of Goliath. We don't need to do that. We need to recognize there is danger. There's danger in this world. And in verses 4 through 7, we are reminded of that danger. We're reminded of it when we see this giant man coming out of the Philistine camp. He's 6 cubits in a span. He's got this bronze helmet. He's got all this armor on. And listen, there are some translation issues that have created some debate over his exact height. So, for instance, if you read in the LXX, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, Goliath's height would be around 6'9". So at minimum, he is 1.5 feet taller than the average Israelite soldier. If the Hebrew text is spot on, he could have been around 9'9". And then again, a cubit is not an exact measure. They didn't have measuring sticks like we have now. A cubit was generally thought to be the distance between a man's elbow and the tip of his finger. So, if I put my arm up against maybe one of y'all tall dudes' arms, you're going to get a little bit of a difference. So it may not be exactly 18 inches, but regardless of any measure that we use, bro was tall. Like, he was a giant man. Whether he's almost 7 feet tall or whether he's almost over 9 feet tall, he's a big dude. And what is not in doubt is that he's also strong. His armor alone weighed close to 125 pounds. And this spear is certainly giant-sized. And listen, the problems that we face, the foes that we face in our experiences, they're not a figment of our imagination. They are real problems, and in a sense, we do ourselves a disservice if we pretend that they don't exist or if we fail to acknowledge them as such. So whether we face opposition from the culture or from our own sinful flesh, we all deal with real foes. And sometimes those foes are the proverbial 800-pound gorilla. You guys all know that one? You know what the 800-pound gorilla is? What does an 800-pound gorilla eat? Anything it wants, right? Just staring across the battlefield at our enemy might fill us with dread, and it might make us feel like we're about to be consumed. And so the marital difficulties maybe that you're facing, the boss you're struggling to get along with, the workplace that's shutting down, the moral decline of our society, wars, famine, natural disasters, these are all real problems that we face. They're not fake, they're not imaginary, they're real, and they are dangerous. This story not only allows but beckons us to acknowledge the enemies that we face, while at the same time we are reminded that Paul said our true enemies are not other people, but the spirits that drive the evil that is present in this world and the fleshly desires that we are tempted by day in and day out. Because I'll tell you, sometimes the problem isn't out there, sometimes the problem is in here. In fact, I would argue that more often than not, the problem is in here. This is where we fight the most battles. But make no mistake, the stakes are high. The stakes are high. Verses 8 and 9, there's this scene where he comes out and he lays down this challenge. Y'all come out, you bring your champion, and I will fight that guy to the death, and whichever one of us wins, that's the winner. And that army, that people, takes the other people as their captives. And in the ancient world, this is a common practice. In order to avoid an all-out war with lots of needless dying, one side would send a champion out to challenge the other side, and if both parties agreed, then they have a one-on-one battle and to the death, and that decides control. It's an all-or-nothing proposition. And Goliath was their champion. The Hebrew word actually is the man between two armies. He's literally standing between two armies, ready to just ruin Israel's whole day. And how many of you wake up in the morning and all you can see is your problems? All you can see is whatever that problem is, whatever the biggest thing on your mind that at that moment is, whether it's a person or an undesirable, miserable circumstance standing there ready to ruin your day. It's ready to steal your joy. It's going to rob you of your rest. It's going to pilfer your peace. And it mocks your position as a child of God, and it lies to you, tells you you're not equal to the difficulty at hand, even with God on your side, because your God's weak. And so Goliath minimizes the armies of Israel, calling the servants or slaves of Saul. He says, you're just slaves. You're not tough. And he is absolutely sure by the end of the day, they're going to be serving the Philistines. And so if we pay closer attention to our foes than we do to the promises of God, we are going to be frozen by fear. If we pay more attention to our problems than we do to what God has told us and what God has promised to us, we're going to be frozen by fear. Verses 10 and 11 tell us that there's this, sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. Goliath has no takers to his challenge. No takers at all. And the Israelites, including their king, they are shooketh. That's just where they're at. They just are afraid. Oh, I was just in the wrong chapter. Yeah, the Philistines said this day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. And on hearing the Philistines' word, what? Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. By the way, Saul was pretty tall for an Israelite as well. He's a pretty big, tough dude. And even he's like, nah, I don't want to go fight that guy. He's the king. Kind of his job, actually. But he doesn't want to do it either. The Israelites are just shaking in their boots. No one wants to step forward, take care of this problem child. No one. They're fixated on his imposing figure, his swagger, and his speech. They're just, that's all they can see is their problem. And despite God's promises and actions over and over and over and over throughout the history of Israel, no one seems to trust God enough in this moment to just take out the trash. And all too often, is that not the case for us? Listen, I cannot be the only one who sees a huge mess, gets completely overwhelmed, and experiences inertia or stagnation. I can't be the only one who looks in my garage and goes, why even try? Like, I'll just come back tomorrow. Like, where do I even start with this mess? I'll just leave it. Maybe it'll take care of itself. Am I the only one that goes through that? And maybe it's not cleaning your garage. Maybe you're the guy that's like, no, my garage is nice and put together. But maybe it's the inside of your car. Maybe it's those financial files that you have to go through. Maybe it's, hey, I know that my marriage is breaking up or that we're having difficulty, but I don't even know, I don't even know where to start with making sure that things are getting right. I don't know who to call, who to talk to. I don't know if I can call a counselor. I don't know if I can, or, hey, I know I've been feeling just off, but man, I just don't want to go to the doctor because I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed by fear. I don't want to go confront the foe because I'm afraid of what the results are going to be. I'm afraid I might lose this battle. And I'm sorry, but it made me think as we were singing, it made me think of this quote, this thing that was written by Theodore Roosevelt called The Man in the Arena. And it's very fitting because that's what David ends up being, the man in the arena, the only man to go into the battle. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Terror of the enemy nailed their feet to the floor. Sometimes we come back to our rational selves and we know that problems aren't going to take care of themselves, and we know that if we just leave it alone, the giant is just going to get gianter. We don't need to be nailed to the floor, though. We've been called not to live in fear, but to live in the trust that God's promises have been true in the past, and they are still true today, and they will be true tomorrow. Matthew chapter 16, 18. In Christ we are promised that it is not us who is on the defensive. Jesus tells them, I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. It is the world that needs a defense from us. If we believe in God's power and his promises, then we also must believe in the power of the gospel to change our attitudes, change our behavior, and change the people around us. If we don't believe in God, then we will find ourselves in the same place as Saul and his army, running from the problems and in danger of being consumed by them. So to defeat the foe, we must trust God and the tools that he gives us. First of all, don't believe what the enemy says about you. Don't believe it. In verses 12 through 19, Jesse's sending his youngest son from the fields where he's just been looking after sheep, and then he goes to the front lines where his brothers are. And all he's supposed to be doing is bringing some food supplies. But while he's there, he's witnessing this thing with Goliath. Goliath is doing this every day for 40 days, twice a day. And he's laying out his challenge, and he's mocking the Israelite army. He's essentially saying, you're nothing more than slaves. You're slaves to Saul, and you'll be our slaves tomorrow. But all that's a lie. The Israelites should have known if they exercised some faith and trust in God, he would deliver them. They should have known this because he's been doing it over and over and over throughout their whole history. And in verse 26, we read this. It says, he asks the guys next to him, what's going to be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who's this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? That's some big words from a 15 or 16-year-old. He hears the mocking of the enemy, but he doesn't buy the lies. In fact, he calls the Israelites the armies of the living God. You're not slaves. They're not the slaves of the Philistines. These are the people who were delivered by the hand of the Almighty from the Pharaoh of Egypt. They are the people who crossed the Red Sea on dry ground, who met with the Lord at Mount Sinai. They're the people who were guided through the wilderness and into the promised land. They're the free people of the living God, and David is incensed. How dare this guy come against the Lord? How is this guy going to think that he's a match for any people that God has claimed for his own? That's true in our lives as well. If God is for us, who can be against us? Who's going to face us down? What problem is so big that God can't work through it? Can't move us through it? There is no problem like that. Well, it might be so dangerous I might die. Well, guess what? He'll guide you through that as well. That's not the biggest problem that we face. The biggest problem we face is lack of faith. I don't know what kind of lies the enemy has been whispering in your ear lately, but I want to remind you today that if Jesus is the Lord of your life, you have the favor of the Almighty on you. His Spirit lives inside you. You're not the sum of your weaknesses. You're not the broken pieces of all of your mistakes. And maybe the enemy has been telling you that your relationships are too broken to be mended, that you're too weak or stupid or lazy or poor or whatever adjective fits that's been in your mind to be a child of God, but that's lies. You have been created with a purpose, and you've been given the position in God's kingdom. And all we need to do is trust in the Lord, exercise faith, and let the power of the Lord shine in and through us. That's our job. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercies, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Don't conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what is God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. It may not always look the way that we expect it to look, and it definitely won't look the way the world would expect it to look, but it will be his perfect will. So don't let the present circumstances cause you to lose trust in God. The Israelites, as a group, they lost confidence in God's ability to deliver them. So they don't send anybody out there. Everybody's shaking in their boots. Everybody's feet are nailed to the floor. They're just hoping the problem is going to go away. 40 days they've been putting up with this. How many more days were the Philistines going to let them continue to just sit on their hands And they allowed the circumstances of their struggle with the Philistines and their fear of this one man to affect their decisions and their actions. And in this case, they're driven to inaction. In other cases in Scripture, it's sometimes not inaction, but the wrong action. Fear and lack of trust cause people to do things they know are wrong, even if they're done for the right reasons. And so in verses 29 through 33, David volunteers to go fight. I'll do it. And no one wants to let him go. He's the only one. He's the only one with the gall to say, you know what, we got to take care of this problem right now. Let me go take out the trash. And people are like, I don't know, man. His brother's mad at him just for talking with the other soldiers. And interestingly enough, he's mad at him because he thinks that David wants all the glory for himself. Well, you go out and get the glory then. He wasn't moving either. They're afraid no one wants to go fight Goliath because they're afraid they might die, and then the Israelites are just going to be slaves again. And nobody wants him to go out because they're afraid he's going to die, and they're all going to be slaves again. But David's not afraid. David is not afraid. Verse 34, David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it dead. I took that thing out of its mouth. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine, by the way, that uncircumcised, that is an insult. He is like, this dirty Philistine, what is he thinking? He's going to be like one of them. He recognizes that the difficulties he's already faced, literal monsters, lions and bears, have prepared him for this occasion. He is confident in his preparation. Listen, faith will do amazing things, but one of the things that it will do is it will shrink our enemies and our worldly struggles. It will shrink our enemies. It makes our enemies less intimidating. Look back at verse 26. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? That's what he says. And now in verses 36 through 37, that's exactly what he's saying again. Who is this dude? This guy has been defying the armies of the living God. And the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go. All right, you've convinced me. Go ahead. And David acknowledges that the preparation that he's received is not just a coincidence. It was preparation. Not only to have the physical ability to overcome this obstacle, but the faith to know that ultimately it was the Lord's victory every time he experienced victory. Every time he shut the mouth of a lion, every time he had dispatched a bear who was attacking his flock, he knows it was the Lord who was helping me out there. So I know I've got this because the Lord is going to do it again. Our difficulties then don't seem so big, do they? But they do to us. Let's acknowledge it. Our difficulties do seem so big. Cancer, mass shootings, domestic violence, abortion, corporate greed, our economy, relationship problems, government corruption. I could go on and on, right? These are all the big problems that we face. And that is not, the list is endless. But what does the Apostle Paul call these things? What does the Apostle Paul say about all of these things? Light and momentary afflictions. Light and momentary? You mean my cancer is just a light and momentary affliction? You mean this problem with my boss, that's a light and momentary affliction? You mean that if I'm actually persecuted by my government for my faith, that's light and momentary affliction? Yes. Because when we trust in God, these things are not as big as we think that they are. Every one of these problems and a million more are only temporary problems with a permanent solution in the blood of Christ the Lamb. In David's mind, he's still just a shepherd, and that's a wild animal, and he's protecting the sheep. Goliath is not a problem that cannot be solved with the Lord's help. So in 38 through 40, this is what we see. We see instead of trusting the fancy armor, Saul's like, here, you take my tunic, my own personal tunic. You take some of my armor. You can go on ahead. He straps on a sword, and he's like, nah, this doesn't fit. This isn't right. I can't do this. He doesn't trust the fancy armor that could be given by the king himself. Instead, he trusts the tools that God's been preparing him with his whole life. He has his sling. He has his stones. He's got his little staff, and that's enough. I've done it a million times. Well, maybe not a million, but at least one lion and at least one bear. And he says, I've already done this, and these are the tools that I had, and this is what God has given to me to do. And we all have tools, and we all have skills that the Spirit has given to us to accomplish the mission that we've been given, and it's up to us to decide whether those gifts are enough. Are they enough? Can I go with just what the Lord has given me, or do I think that I need to run after more? But if we run after more, maybe we just find ourselves struggling under the excessive weight of things that ultimately will not help us. David's like, this is not, it's not that it's not right. It's just I can't even move in this stuff. I can't do what I'm going to do in this stuff. Listen, when we follow through with faith, our foes will be overcome. If we trust God alone, then the battle is already won. And this story is often presented as the overcoming of impossible odds. The giant versus the kid. David's probably in his mid to late teens. How is David going to come out alive? I don't know how this is going to happen. And even Goliath thinks it's insulting. Verses 41 through 44. He is convinced he's got the upper hand because of his size and his strength. But the truth is, David is wildly underestimated here. Not only by Goliath, but by us. The teacher that I listened to just the other day wildly underestimates David. Listen, y'all ever see a sling in action? Have you ever seen, listen, you can go on YouTube. Do it tomorrow or do it later today. Go on YouTube, find somebody using a shepherd's sling. You come back and you tell me, that's kind of a weak weapon. Wrong. Not only could a good slinger become incredibly accurate, but they were also powerful. I've seen these videos. And these things, like when people practice with those things, you can get real good at it. And by the way, you're throwing a projectile racing at a target at like 150 miles an hour. Anybody want to try feeling a rock in their forehead at 150 miles an hour? I don't. I can tell you what it will do. It will kill you. Even if you are a big person. Even if you are a large man, it will kill you. Now imagine a shepherd boy just hanging out in the fields with sheep all day, every day, with no TV, no cell phone, no handheld video games, just a sling and all the time in the world. A 15-year-old boy with a sling in time. Guess what he's doing all the time? He's chucking rocks. That's what that guy's doing. He is trying to kill birds. He is trying to kill gophers. That's all this kid is doing all day, every day, with this sling. Oh, he also faces occasional threats, and he needs to be ready to deal with them. Your boy David is skilled with a sling. And I really think when you evaluate this fight, I really think that the outcome of this fight is a foregone conclusion. I think everybody just underestimated David. I think it's actually a foregone conclusion. David is confident in his skills, and he's fighting on behalf of the armies of the Lord Almighty. Honestly, what chance did Goliath have? Verse 45 through verse 47. David said to the Philistines, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I've come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defied. You made a mistake. I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me." So why do we spend so much time worrying about our foes when they should spend more time worrying about us? Why do we spend more time, all this time, worrying about the enemies in our lives, about these big things that we're facing, when we should spend more time trusting God and getting familiar, really familiar with the tools He's given to us? He's given us His Word. Man, if we were like the shepherd boy, spending all of our time with this, and maybe a little less time with our TVs and our phones and our video games and our hobbies and whatnot, if I spend a little more time with this, maybe when I face an enemy, I'll be more prepared. We think we were tasked with fighting every enemy, but we were given one job. One job. What is it? Say it again, louder. Go make disciples. It's literally the only directive Jesus gave us. Go make disciples. He didn't say fight the giants. He didn't say worry about your culture. He didn't say worry about the economy. He didn't say none of that stuff. None of that stuff is our job. We act like it's our job because we try to take everything on ourselves, because we don't trust God to take care of it, so we think, oh, we got to do it. We also think that we need a giant to go fight other giants then. We sit back like the armies of the Lord, the armies of Israel, waiting for somebody else to go do it. I need somebody else to go fight my battle for me. What a huge error. We don't need to find the biggest bully on the block to go fight our bullies for us. We don't need a king. Saul was doing nothing about this problem. We don't need armies. We don't need presidents. We don't need governors or mayors or even pastors to fight our battles for us and make the evil go away. Listen, I am more than willing to help you with whatever problems, because that's what we do in the body of Christ. We help each other. But listen, the Lord is going to do a better job of helping you through your problems than I will. I promise you that. And I'm not even saying, that's not self-deprecation. I'm just saying, I'm not as good as God at fighting battles. What we need is people like David who work with what God gives them and trust that He will see them through. We need people like the apostles who didn't need worldly strength or armies or violence or might to change the world. They had faith that the gospel would change the world around them. They preached the gospel, and the kingdom of the world fell into the hands of Christianity in a few hundred years. We must be ready to act decisively then when God calls and grants us opportunity. David was ready to act. No wasted time. Verses 48 to 51, he runs up there, he grabs his sling, he throws a stone in there, and he knocks him down. No wasted time. He didn't call one last prayer meeting just to be sure this is what God wanted him to do. Listen, pray and then do something. He knew his calling. He knew that God would continue to be faithful to His word, and so he took action. Obviously, in the New Testament, Christ calls us to different means and methods for overcoming our foes. No one needs to leave here and cut off someone's head. Don't do that. We've been given new weapons. And just like Goliath and even David's fellow countrymen, the world and even sometimes other Christians underestimate the weapons that we bring into the arena. Goliath saw that sling. You think he'd never seen a sling before? He knew what a sling could do, and yet here he is, just underestimating it. Well, I don't think that's going to work. Listen, the world doesn't think that things like love works. It doesn't think that we can overcome with peace. But that's what we are called to use. Those are the weapons that we've been given by Jesus Christ himself. And he says, these actually work when you put them to work. When you trust me, these will work. When we act in faith, we go to our foes and we preach the truth of the gospel, we have them right where we want them. I got you right where I want you. Because now you've heard the gospel and you have to do something with it. And the Spirit of the Lord can change the people around us and change their hearts. And then he can take that and spread it through them. And then if our neighbors are Christian, and if their neighbors become Christian, then we see our communities changing. And when our communities start to change, then the other communities around us start to change. And then we see our states start to change. And then we see the states around us start to change. And then we see our nation start to change. And then we see the world start to change. And we think, oh no, that's silly, that doesn't work. But guess what? It happened. Because 12 guys in Jerusalem started preaching the gospel, and 300 years later, the emperor of Rome is a Christian. If you think it can't happen, you're wrong. It has. It has happened before. It can happen again. But it didn't happen with armies. It happened with people preaching the gospel to one another. It's not us stuck in here with them. They're stuck in here with us. David was not in danger. David was the danger. We are the danger for a world lost in its sins. We are the danger for enemies that want to discourage our faith and steal our joy. When we trust God, he will provide everything that we need to overcome our foes and deliver a victory. Do you believe that this morning? Then let's leave here this morning and act on that belief. Let's pray.